Hello, this is Mike Burek, your host and producer of Krynytsia, The Well, a podcast series about topics of interest to Ukrainians around the world. Today is Tuesday, November 12th, 2024. This episode is produced for The Ukrainian Weekly, a newspaper published in English for the global Ukrainian community since 1933. Our guest today is the award-winning Dutch filmmaker and photographer Miriam Guttmann, who is director of the new documentary Front Row. Welcome, Miriam. How are you?
Thanks so much. I'm really excited for both the interview as well as the premiere on Saturday.
Great. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Of course.
So, to start off with, can you talk a little bit about your professional background?
Yeah, sure. When I was 9, my parents took my sister and me on a big trip around the world. And very quickly after leaving, I asked my mom if I could take some pictures on the old Canon that she had brought. And after we came back and reviewed the pictures I took versus my parents noticed that I had almost been on a whole different trip than they and my sister had. So while my parents had mostly taken very nice touristy pictures of us standing in front of cultural highlights, I had been photographing portraits and details in nature. So on that trip, I really discovered my love for photography and for capturing beauty through a documentary lens. And later, I expanded this to documentary filmmaking, as that was a form I didn't know that much about yet. So I studied documentary directing at the Netherlands Film Academy and graduated with a short film about Dutch fertility doctor Jan Karbaat, who secretly used his own sperm and had over 90 children. And after finishing my studies, I wanted to expand this short into a full series. So I did, and that series premiered at Sundance and was sold internationally to over 20 countries. And that's where really when everything took off.
Can you describe what the new documentary Front Row is about?
Yes, definitely. Front Row is a documentary which follows a group of exiled Ukrainian dancers who came together in the Netherlands to form the United Ukrainian Ballet Company and how they welcomed Alexander Butko, a wounded soldier who lost both his legs in the war, into their midst.
And why did you decide to become a director of the film about the United Ukrainian Ballet Company? And how is the American actress and television producer Sarah Jessica Parker involved with this film?
Front Row is a deeply personal story to me in many ways. Firstly, my grandfather was a Jewish refugee who was forced to flee his home country of Poland during the Second World War. And eventually he ended up in the Netherlands as a stateless citizen after years of great suffering, loss, and persecution. And then, remarkably and unfortunately, he succeeded in quickly rebuilding his life as a theater director and started one of the most renowned theater companies in the Netherlands. So, through his art, he was able to reclaim his identity. And then on another level, I've always wanted to include the medium of dance in my films, as I myself danced ballet for over 15 years. And lastly, as a documentary filmmaker, I'm always looking for multi-layered, character-driven stories with a strong sense of urgency. And this story distinguishes itself from this type of narrative by interweaving the current war in Ukraine with the power of art. So the dancers in Front Row use their talent, their dance as a way to preserve their humanity. Rather than fighting on the front line, they continue their battle on the ballet stage.
And what about Sarah Jessica Parker? How is she involved in with the film?
Yes, so Sarah Jessica Parker and her producer Alison Benson saw an item on the United Ukrainian Ballet in 60 Minutes and wanted to make a film about it. Sarah Jessica is a former ballerina herself, and they got really excited. But then soon enough, they found out that there was already a Dutch film involved, Dutch crew, and then they decided to team up with us. So both her and her team, Alison, Claire, and Gaby, were amazing to work with, and they gave us very helpful feedback in the edit, and were very involved throughout the entire process.
And when and why was the United Ukrainian Ballet Company established in the Netherlands?
Yes, so principal dancer Alexis, who is also in the film, had the idea to set up United Ukrainian Ballet after the war broke out in 2022. And then together with Dutch prima ballerina Igone de Jong and Matthijs Guttmann, they set up the United Ukrainian Ballet. And culture is often a crucially overlooked casualty of war. So to combat that, the United Ukrainian Ballet was founded to help preserve and showcase Ukrainian culture globally. And therefore, it's so important as an international community to continue to be aware and support Ukrainian culture.
And how did the 26-year-old Ukrainian wounded veteran, Alexander Sasha Budko, become involved with the United Ukrainian Ballet Company?
Yeah, so principal dancer Alexis connected with Alexander Sasha through Instagram and invited him to come and watch Giselle in Washington while Alexander was rehabilitating in the USA after getting his prosthetics. And seeing them perform, he fell in love with ballet. And after he was welcomed by the company to join them. And then eventually they performed together in LA in the Segerstrom Theater in July 23, which was a huge success.
And an important part of the film is the relationship between Alexei Tutunik and Sasha. Can you talk a little bit about the relationship?
So, yeah, both of them are determined and dedicated to fight for their country. And when literal fighting on the front line was no longer possible for Alexander because of his injury, they found each other in continuing their fight through the power of dance and culture. And it was really beautiful to see how their friendship developed over the course of making this documentary. And today they are like brothers for each other.
So the film shows a very personal view of the Russian war against Ukraine. Please tell us about it.
Yeah, I'm passionate about telling personal stories, and especially in times of war, people are often reduced to numbers. When we read the news, we read about numbers and not about people. And as a documentary filmmaker, it's my job to bring back the faces and human stories behind these numbers. When the war broke out, I knew immediately that I wanted to make a film about people affected by the war, and I feel very lucky to have found this story and hope to have done justice to my objective of telling war stories in a personal way. I think it's important to keep telling these stories, especially 2.5 years later, because when the war first broke out, everyone was glued to the developments in Ukraine, and now we have sort of become numb. So it's also my job to keep shining light on the atrocities and injustices that are still happening in Ukraine today.
Miriam, when and where did Sasha perform with the ballet company, and how was the performance received?
They performed together in Los Angeles in the Segerstrom Theater in July 2023, and it was a huge success. He got a standing ovation, and lots of media wrote about the performance. I think it was really, really remarkable.
And where is Sasha today, and what is he doing?
Alexander is determined to raise awareness for people in Ukraine with a disability. With many soldiers coming back from the front line injured, he is set on a mission to improve their standards of life. And he even became Ukraine's bachelor in the last season of The Bachelor.
Miriam, I understand that the documentary Front Row is debuting this weekend in New York City.
That's
Can you
right.
tell our audience where that will happen? Actually, where and when? And where can our audience find out more information about the documentary Front Row and also about yourself?
Yeah, so my website is miriamgoodman.com, and you can find out more through the website also of either my website or the website of Scenery, scenery.eu. So the world premiere of Front Row will be this Saturday in New York, in Village East by Angelica, and the screening time is 6:15 p.m.
Is there somewhere online where people can get tickets for it?
You can get tickets online on docnyc.net, and the premiere is on Saturday, and there's also another screening on Sunday.
Great. Thanks so much for that information. Miriam, I want to thank you for joining us today on Krenica.
Thanks so much for the interview.
I have been speaking with Miriam Guttmann, who is director of the new documentary Front Row about the United Ukrainian Ballet Company and its connection with a Ukrainian wounded veteran Alexander Butko. I'm Mike Burek, your host and producer of Knizia. This episode has been produced for The Ukrainian Weekly, a newspaper published in English for the global Ukrainian community since 1933. Until next time, that's all for now.